Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I've got Mrina here, who's going to be talking to us about WYSIWYG editors. I actually, I've written a lot about this, trying to get you all to come join us. And it's like WYSIWYG editors tend to get a really bad rap among developers, so I think it's going to be really interesting to hear what she has to say. But before that, I'm just going to go ahead and do a few slides of my own, let you know what's coming up. First of all, I gotta say thank you to our sponsors because we run a lot of free events on this site. We have 2 meetups a month. Now we have like a number of different shows going on. We've got free conferences, and all of that's free because we have sponsors who make it possible for me to do that. So we've got a new sponsor this month, composable.com. It's a great place if you're looking for anything about composable architecture, particularly around e-commerce. I would check that site out. It's got all kinds of news and information. It's got examples and things like that. So if you want to learn about composable architecture, particularly in the e-commerce space, check out composable.com. And thanks to them for sponsoring. We also are sponsored by Netlify. Netlify is a great place to deploy and host your websites. They've got all kinds of functionality. This site's hosted on Netlify. I use their serverless functions, their edge functions. I use a bunch of their different offerings. So it's a really great service. Check out Netlify if you're looking for somewhere to deploy your site. And speaking of composable architectures, if you're looking for a headless CMS, Contentful is a great headless CMS. It's really intuitive, really easy to use. So I highly recommend checking out Contentful if you're looking for a CMS for your sites and applications. We got a bunch of upcoming events. I actually got a lot. We got a lot going on this month. Okay. So we have a new show that's been running now. We're going to be on episode 4. So on the Tuesdays that we don't run one of these meetups, Ray runs one of his live coding shows called Code Break. In case you don't get the reference of the image, it's this. Anybody remember the Point Break movie? That's what. Anyway, that was my idea. Good or bad, it was my idea. So in this upcoming episode, he's going to be talking about how to add an API to your website. So it should be a lot of fun. We code along with Ray. He'll be live next week at this time, 1 p.m. Eastern. You can kind of scan that or go to the URL there, or just check out cfe.dev and look at the upcoming events. I've got a really fun one I'm really looking forward to if you're interested in software as a service. I've got 4 different experts, Bill Tarr from AWS, Jason Wadsworth, Andre Moreno, Seth Goguen, I'm trying to pronounce that right, who are all going to be talking about how to use step functions to orchestrate complex tasks that you would have to do in a SaaS application. So whether you are interested in SaaS or you're just interested in AWS step functions, this is going to be a really great event. So come check that out in 2 weeks. We've also got our DevRel show, all about DevRel and DevRel adjacent roles. We're going to be talking to Jay Miller on March 27th at 4:30. That's Aaron and I are going to go live. We're going to have a nice, fun chat. It's going to be great. So Jay Miller is with Ivan, and we're going to be talking about kind of increasing access to opportunities in DevRel with Jay. And finally, we've got Too Full to Stack, our other live coding show. So Nick is going to be talking about Angular. He's specifically going to be using the analog.js framework to build an application with Angular, so you can code along with him on March 28th. So that's going to be a busy week. We got it with 26, 27, 28. We've got events. So busy week coming up soon. As always, if you've got feedback about this event, about upcoming events, or you want to speak or you want to sponsor, please reach out to me at brian@cfe.dev. I love hearing from you all. Yes, this session is recorded. Whether you're on YouTube or on Crowdcast, you can just go to the URL that you're at right now as soon as this is over and watch the recording. Also, I will be posting a slightly edited version where you don't have to hear me do this whole spiel in the beginning on YouTube, probably in the next day or two. Speaking of recordings, I've almost hit the 300 mark of recordings on the site. going back now 6.5 years. So we got 6.5 years of recordings on just about any topic you want. So go back and check those out. It's a really great resource. Obviously, we've got more stuff coming. I've got things I didn't even announce because I didn't want to spend forever, uh, on this little intro. So please follow us on Mastodon, Discord, YouTube, or LinkedIn. We're also on Threads. I need to add that there. So we're on all the places but but not on the bad place. We're not there. Sorry. So you can also join the Discord and chat with everybody in between our meetups. So that's it for my intro. I'm going to turn it over to Mrina, who's going to talk to us about the WYSIWYG.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. And that's really exciting to see all of the stuff CFE is doing. So definitely check that out. So hi, everyone. I'm Mrina. I am a developer relations manager at both TinyMC, the Husky mascot, and CK Editor, the raccoon mascot. And I'm here to talk about WYSIWYG and WYSIWYG editors. So the agenda today looks a little bit like this. Let's define WYSIWYG for those of you who are not aware of what this acronym is. I'll talk to you a little bit non-technically about what the history and origin is to keep it fun. And then let me give you some examples, some features of editors today. And then I'm going to walk you through a few case studies that we've done at both Tiny and CK on how this actually is interesting and valuable for developers to learn about. And then finally, I'm going to talk to you about why it matters, whether you're a front end developer or full stack developer. I'm going to tell you exactly why it matters to you to learn about WYSIWYG editors. And then I'm going to talk to you about what's next with our editors specifically. And, we'll open it up to some questions. And I'm sure Brian and I will have a good chat about that after as well. So if all of that sounds good, I'll get started. So WYSIWYG, let's kind of start with the basics, right? WYSIWYG, that stands for what you see is what you get. And it refers to a system in which content, specifically, let's say text and graphics like images that you're seeing on the screen, can be edited in a form like closely like a resembling appearance when it's printed, like with a printer, or when it's displayed in like your website. So, or even the presentation, right? If you're using Google Docs. Now, this kind of intuitive approach of exactly what you're typing is what you get is very different from like a coding approach or a markup approach where you're not sure what the outcome is until after you've executed or rendered it. This is a cool image that I took from a recent trip of mine in Iceland. And, you can see that under the image, I'm giving it a caption saying this image is very pretty. And that's kind of exactly if I wanted to maybe publish this onto a document or save it. My hope is the next time I pull this up, this is exactly what I would see. So that's kind of it. And why does this matter to you? It matters because you probably are using WYSIWYG editor in your day-to-day life in some form, some manner, some fashion, right? If you've used Shopify, which most of us have through online shopping, this kind of paragraph that you see over here, that is actually TinyMCE. That you're looking at and that specific editor. So the thing that you use to put in your description, maybe if you've used Airbnb, maybe if you've used a WYSIWYG editor on, let's say, LinkedIn, MailChimp. There's so many other examples. You've probably just come across a WYSIWYG editor that's kind of embedded into a web application. And it's really important because it kind of is the way you as a user and a creator or your users as a developer interact with your site or your specific tool. So very important tool that often gets forgotten by a lot of developers, but I think is very interesting. So now let's go back a little bit in history, right? This term WYSIWYG was actually coined in like the 1970s, and it kind of describes some of the earlier word processors that came about at that time. So before WYSIWYG, text editors were actually just limited to inserting plain text. So there was no formatting, the bold, italics, underline, the thing that you see on the leftmost side, it says Bravo editor in bold and in center with like this heading one to like text. All of that did not exist. It was just plain simple text that we would see. So the first WYSIWYG editor, as you see, the Bravo editor, was developed in the early 1970s by Xerox Alto System. So it actually allowed users to see sort of formatted text displayed in different fonts. There were margins in the pages, and there were different sizes. And but in the Bravo editor, the screen resolution didn't exactly match the printer output, but at least you got a certain sense of like this can be altered to close enough to what I see. And then in the 1980s and 90s, Microsoft and Apple came around with the GUI, or graphical user interface. And that kind of made WYSIWYG editors easier to use because you had the ability to click buttons and you had menu options and things like that. So after that, the adoption of WYSIWYG accelerated because, the World Wide Web and the internet happened. And then you got this thing with HTML editors. So even like non-technical people who are using CMSs could start publishing content online using these early HTML editors. And that's kind of like how WYSIWYG has kind of transformed over time. So what you think of as WYSIWYG rich text editor today is actually dates all the way back to 1970s and has a long form history of just growing its knowledge. And the term WYSIWYG has one more interesting piece of history. So there's a comedian called Flip Wilson who brought the saying, "What you see is what you're gonna get," and she brought it to popularity in 1970s ish with their drag persona Geraldine Jones. So, because of Wilson, the following decade, we saw a lot of timelines and a lot of things. And that you could say that a lot of people in the computing world, especially developers, used to listen to that music. And, when they started doing something with what they see is what they get, they kind of ended up naming that. And then it's also said that there's even like Larry Tesler who invented, I believe, copy paste. They also said something like, what you see on the screen should be what you get when you print it." And given that and a number of other players, it seems like the term was eventually coined around "what you see is what you get." And we never know exactly who coined the first term. There's different examples. Some say it's like the founders of Bravo 3 with John Sable. Some say it's Larry Tesler. But we really never know who the true origin is. But it's really cool to see like how almost a pop culture phenomenon ended up influencing this very popular term, and it has a lot of history. So I hope that was fun. But let me get into a little bit more of examples of WYSIWYG that you might see today. So some of the more popular cases and the most probably basic examples is word processors like Microsoft Word or Google Docs. And these were some of the more first practical applications of WYSIWYG that allowed documents to be formatted and edited visually. I believe most of us would have used some format of Microsoft Word or Google Docs at some point in our lives, especially if you're watching this webinar, right? And you have edited your documents and formatted them visually. Now, what if you wanted to take that and put it into a web application? Well, then that's where kind of website builders and CMSs came along, and these platforms like WordPress, Drupal, Wix, they sort of incorporate some of these WYSIWYG editors so content can actually just be added without coding. It's pretty great because you can't expect all of your content creators and your end users to know how to code these things. In fact, Drupal's default editor is CK editor, which is highly customizable, and we'll get into that a little later. But it's kind of important to see like how the needs that we had with Word kind of evolved into something we would need within text boxes, within websites. And they also are now in almost everyday applications. So if you're using Confluence, if you're using Dev2, you're using Shopify, you're using Monday, or even your emails, you're probably using some sort of WYSIWYG editor. And in short, if you're ever typing a piece of text and there's formatting options, there's images, there's links, that is a WYSIWYG editor. even if it's a small balloon icon and it doesn't intuitively look like one, like with a traditional toolbar, it is still an editor that allows you to edit documents online and collaboratively. And that's kind of a key piece that we'll be talking about a little later. So there's also some community informed softwares that use these sort of WYSIWYG editors. LMS platforms, a lot of learning management systems and CRMs also integrate this into their content creation needs for their students or their customers. And the real key thing is it really enables text editing and formatting in a visual way across so many diverse platforms. And there's not one singular application for it, which is what makes it such a versatile tool. And I think if you think about it from a development perspective, it's very powerful because think about this small component that can be used for such a variety of use cases and it's not siloed into one specific thing. So, when you think of a WYSIWYG editor, what you typically think of, and what we simplify it down to almost is, it has some fonts, it has some sizes, it has some colors. It can do bold, italicized, underline. We can insert some images. We can do tables if it's a little more advanced. We can add links, and then if it's a little more advanced, we can export and to PDF, export and import from Word sometimes, export to HTML. It has some accessibility checkers if it's a little bit more advanced, and then in some global text editors, it's also right to left language support. So these are some of the basic features. But what I'd like to do is actually walk you through a case study with Tiny to show you how this sort of basic features can actually save developers thousands of dollars and probably even more time building out some of these features that are just available out of the box in today's editors, right? So even though they look very simple, trust me, they have taken years of development and take years of maintenance. And sometimes you just don't want to maintain these sort of simple pieces of components and code. So today we're going to talk. Our first case study that I want to walk through is Minute Me and Tiny MCE. And what so Minute Me is a cloud-based platform, and what they do is they work with helping customers with meeting management, right? Their meeting management software, and they work with complex. So the story behind Minute Me is they started with a complex construction project, and they wanted to streamline planning, conduct, and follow up meetings. And as you can imagine, all of these meetings have agendas, meeting notes, action items, which means there's a lot of text and reference documents. And they wanted to put this all into one seamless sort of process. And their app, as you can see in the screenshot, required a WYSIWYG editor at multiple levels in multiple formats. And they were trying to build it out of the box. And they very soon realized that it was just simply taking a lot of time. And they're a small development team, and this is not their main focus, right? They're not developing a rich text editor. All they need is a rich text editor to fit their needs and to customize to their specific UI. So they actually realized that it's going to cost them almost an extra $40,000 a year to build, Tiny MCE, to build a rich text editor with their own nuances and custom components. And they decided that the cost to time to market plus the cost to develop new features just didn't make sense. And that's kind of when they came to Tiny MCE. They realized they could just save up on this $40,000 per year, because they didn't just need, your simple bold italicized underline. They also needed to make sure that this component works across different browsers. They also needed to make sure copy pasting worked good, list formatting, right? If there's a bulleted list, that works, table formatting. So all of these are very crucial niche features. And if you've ever worked with HTML, if you've ever worked with the content editable API that, renders how things work on your web page, you know that it is a big pain. And to have to develop these features individually as a developer can take a lot. So let's go through some of their challenges, right? They didn't have copy paste. So they had a basic editor. And I know everyone here is going to tell me that, hey, I can set up a basic editor. Cool. But can you copy paste? Can you do list formatting, cross device compatibility? Can you make sure that what I see on Google Chrome is the same thing that I see on Safari, is the same thing that I see on Firefox, and the same thing that I see on Edge? And that is pretty tricky. Can you make sure that my table is formatted correctly and it's the same across all these devices? And what if I wanted to add some more customizable plugins? Is that possible? So what Minimi ended up doing is they took a look at TinyMZ and they said all of these capabilities that we need in our editor are available out of the box, which means that we don't have to code much other than literally add our in the JSON packet, like add the plugin to our to the TinyMZ editor, and we'll get it out of the box. So they actually, the biggest demand was this Power Paste plugin, which is clean copy and paste. So imagine a lot of people who are planning and building, and their end users are copying things from a Word document or PDF document. They want it to look exactly like it does on that document. And oftentimes, if you've copied and pasted things over, the clipboard can mess it up. So what TinyMC's Power Paste does is it keeps it consistent between the two documents. And it's a very, very powerful feature that, is very hard to build, but fit in with Minute Me's capabilities. And they added it. They also added table formatting, which basically is again provided out of the box with this rich text editor. There's also an API for TinyMC with custom plugins. There was cross-device and browser compatibility. So, we have a team of engineers who are working constantly to make sure that this component renders exactly the same on different browsers, if not close to the same. And what happened with all of this is TinyMC just became economical with the self-hosting options, the extensive API, some of the file uploading capabilities, and the biggest thing is it fit into the React-based architecture that Minute Me's application already had. So some of the popular frameworks that this platform integrates with is React, Angular, Vue, Blazor, Svelte, and so on and so forth. So when Minimi looked at it, they knew that they had the kind of support that they needed with this integration, and they immediately said, hey, this upgrade is going to lead to a lesser number of support tickets because the support is completely supported by the team. We don't have to develop individual features for our editor, and the effort needed to make editor updates is dramatically less. So that is why Minute Me sort of chose that. And if you look at the end result, what ended up happening is they saved over 18 weeks of developer time. So if you have 2 week sprints, that's over 9 sprints, right? That developers at this company would have been spending developing like editors with a specific feature, and that is on like a good path. We don't have any sort of, that's on a building out the critical path features, and we're not kind of diving left or right from there. Also, there were 5 feature requests like the Power Paste tables right out of the box. And there were 7 open issues that they had with their existing editor, like functionalities and rendering, that were just avoided by switching over to an existing editor. So as a developer, this should speak volumes in terms of like why we need to pay attention. Because sometimes, yes, the quickest answer and maybe even cheapest initially seems like, let's build an editor from scratch. But using sort of a pre-built editor that comes out of the box actually decreases a lot of valuable time for your developers because they don't have to spend a significant amount of their sprints developing an editor that already exists. And it also saves you from a lot of catching a lot of bug requests and maybe even future feature requests because that editor and their team is already probably building it out. And I talked about TinyMCE a little bit, and I talked about like this rich text editor that has some enhanced capabilities, right? It's not just bold, italics, underline. It's some very powerful things that enable the end user. Now, I'd like to kind of switch context and dive into another sort of case study that will show you the power of rich text editors in maybe something even more of a buzzword today, right? The next question is how how does rich text editors keep up with technologies today and work with maybe Web3? So MailChain and CK Editor actually sort of had this partnership where MailChain created a secure, decentralized messaging app, and they made it possible to communicate in a Web3 native way. Right. So with their SDKs, developers can usually add like a Web3 email to their projects and applications and allow their users to engage in a truly Web3 way. And that's where CK Editor came in, because they needed a customizable editor that was very modular, that would plug into their APIs and work with their look and feel of the product. So the the critical hurdle that I would say MailChain faced was creating this sort of familiar writing and editing experience. So today we kind of take it for granted when we're just typing an email. That very familiar writing experience. We know exactly where the bold, italics, underline is. We know how the look and feel of the typing is, and as soon as we type, we want it to render in that way that we see it, right? We want that WYSIWYG feeling, and that's kind of what MailChain wanted. And the user adoption was slow because their initial version of the app had just a basic text editor and did not have the seamless writing experience user expected with a email service. So this challenge brought them to CK Editor. So they needed some advanced text formatting. They needed it to be modular because it needed to work with their specific APIs. It needed to be customizable, and it needed to scale to suit a specific growing platform. And CK Editor came in perfect because it gave them that out of the box features for advanced text formatting. It also gave them a highly customizable UI to sort of match MailChain's look and feel without feeling like, oh, this is just a rich text editor that they grabbed out of the box and copy pasted, right? You wouldn't even know it's a CK editor. It's sort of just built in to match how that application feels. And the modular architecture, and I keep saying this because our goal as a developer, especially when you become a little bit more of an advanced developer, is to create products that can be used, modified, and reused for your own purposes, right? It needs to be modular. And I think CKEditor is a phenomenal piece of code base to look at, to see how they've constructed almost everything from even typing to even like everything as a plugin. Like even the fact that you're typing a text is a plugin that you can customize. So if you want to change typing in CK Editor, you could do it. You could extend the plugin and do that. So it's that highly customizable and modular, which makes it incredible for something like a Web3 application. And of course, because it's built with enterprises in mind, like they work with some of the top customers out there, like Microsoft, Salesforce. So it's of course very scalable and just made sense for MailChain to do that. And in doing so, the end result was their users, the adoption actually significantly increased because their users were just like, hey, this is an improved writing and editing experience. And more importantly, it's a very familiar writing and editing experience. And that is exactly why sort of MailChain was able to overcome their own UI adoption barrier. So it's really important from a full stack and front end developer perspective to, as we're adopting maybe these new technologies like blockchain technologies, to remember the first and foremost principles of keeping things user friendly and familiar and intuitive. So I think this really showcases, these two examples, in my perspective, really showcases how if you think about rich text editor not just as an editor, but like as an extension of your users day-to-day usage, and the fact that we've been using these kind of technologies for years, you'll actually see the way in which some of these technologies can be plugged in and used within your web applications. So given a lot of spiel, I've given a lot of examples, but why is this important for developers, right? Technically, why is it important to me as a developer? And I think the really key important thing is we need to remember that these are just not text input fields, right? Text input fields, I agree. It's an HTML thing. I can put it in my website and it's very easy to think. But these rich text editors are actually sophisticated ecosystems of web development. And if you actually are able to understand one of these projects, you actually are able to get your head around some sort of very fascinating modular user interface that has like complex backend interactions that are almost happening in real time, right? As you're typing on a web application, things need to change, things need to adapt. Your database maybe that is connected needs to be updated. So it's a very interesting niche of technology. So let's talk about these things, right? Why is it important? For if you're a front end developer, I think complex UI interactions is probably something you are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And implementing formatting commands requires a very deep understanding of DOM, right? Document object model, event handling, and the execution of commands via like the exact command API. And you have to do all of this while maintaining a reactive and consistent state across the editors. So the virtual DOM, of course, there's like the usage of the virtual DOM for performance optimization, and you can use other strategies to synchronize the editor states and user action. But if you work and even contribute to the code base of some of these front end technologies, you'll actually get a sense of how complex interactions happen and probably some of the best practices today in terms of state management out there. The next biggest thing, if you're a front end engineer or developer, is cross browser compatibility. I have been a front end engineer in the past and a full stack developer, and I know how hard it is to get your user interface to look exactly how the design team requested it across from Chrome to Firefox to Safari. And even though you're coding it in JavaScript, and even though it's like very similar CSS styling, there's always going to be some of these specific DOM implementations and styling inconsistencies, the way in which JavaScript just executes in some of these browsers, right? And it's really interesting how the rich text editor world has almost become an expert at this. And they've figured out the intricacies of kind of adapting to the evolving web standards and browser capabilities. And they ensure that their component is honestly very solid across different browsers, because that's kind of what they're selling at the end of the day. And then the third thing is content editable API. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but at the heart of every rich text editor is this API, which is very powerful for in-browser content editing. So it basically works with DOM manipulation, selection range management. You could even have like custom text manipulation logic, which go a little bit beyond the API's limitations. But basically, you can handle nested lists and content inconsistencies because of this API. And it's really incredible to learn about kind of how things work behind the end and how to do DOM manipulation. And it gives you like a very very solid fundamentals. And then the final thing is, of course, custom plugins. If you are not interested in any of this and maybe you're an introductory front-end developer, just creating a custom plugin that works with one of these rich text editor, contributing to their ecosystem is super valuable for you as a developer, because it will allow you to interact with all of these pieces that I've talked about earlier, but also it will, it will give you kind of a very nice introduction to event hooks, the isolation of like this plugin from the core editor's functionality, and kind of seeing how things work, maybe even how things break each other's functionality. And you'll also realize how solid that core functionality is, because even if your plugin breaks, sometimes the function editor's capability doesn't. So as a front-end developer, that's why it is extremely important to actually know about these things, because I think it's best in class in terms of how they work with the front-end technologies. And then if you're a full-stack developer, well, security is of prime importance, right? XSS threats, CSRF threats, they're not going away. In fact, they're probably just increasing over time. And I think it's really cool to see some of the advanced techniques in terms of content sanitization and other mitigation strategies that these rich text editors have started using to handle user generated content. And if CK Editor is a Polish company, so how they've managed to um, help their users with adherence to data protection standards such as GDPR. So I think it's really valuable that you can learn a lot of things around security as a full stack developer by kind of contributing and learning and keeping up to date on the tech stack for rich text editors. Then there's, of course, the backend integration and real time collaboration piece. Looks like I forgot to put real time collaboration, but it's a pretty big piece. And, real time collaboration is imagine, and I'm going to show you an example just in a few minutes about taking this Google Docs or Notion like experience from Notion and Google Docs and putting it into your web application. And you don't even have to write a single piece of code other than integrate this rich text editor into your application, right? And they've used some RESTful API design principles, authentication mechanisms, WebSocket, and real time communication to kind of pull it all together and give you that. Real-time collaboration environment. And it's very powerful if you think about it, because it's not just a rich text editor, it's a editor that you can collaborate on. And I think that's really incredible. And something, if you're able to kind of fully understand the functionalities and features, it's very valuable as a full stack developer, because there's nothing more nerve-wracking for us as web developers than something that's happening in real time. And then there's, of course, data serialization, data storage, and that's kind of the final piece of the puzzle, where there's different strategies for serializing editor content into storeable formats, whether it's JSON, HTML, and how it's going to get stored in your database schema design. So whether you're storing it in a document-based database, things like that, you'll have to kind of know that. But I think there's also a very niche piece on you can study kind of how they've learned to optimize data serializing and fast retrieval. So it's really interesting to study these things. So whether you're a front end developer, full stack developer, I think rich text editors themselves, the component itself is so simple, yet behind the scenes it's so complex and it has such valuable insights and very cutting edge and best practices and best standards for development. So I highly recommend checking these sort of open source projects and getting a sense of how they work behind the scenes. So now I've talked a lot about this, and let me talk a little bit about what's next, which I think is, as we venture into like the world of Web3 and AI, I think we can anticipate that these WYSIWYG editors, they're today, we think of them as collaborative. We think of them, what you see is what you get, intuitive, but they're going to become smarter and more intuitive, if that's even possible, right? And this is a screenshot of CK Editor's collaboration feature. So you can see two people working on the document, and I'm going to demo this in a second. But you can also see their AI assistant is in work, and the AI assistant was asked to write something. And today, the AI assistant is a kind of UI wrapper that connects to ChatGPT, AWS Bedrock, Azure AI, and it can write and make suggestions and personalized tips. But in the future, I could even see it doing image generation, right? Advanced content analysis, maybe automated SEO suggestions for some content creators, personalized design tips. So there's so much more growth opportunity there just within the AI space, and then of course within the Web3 space, there's very interesting ways in which you can think about digital content kind of being simplified and moved into these spaces. And I just think overall the future is just going to be simplifying this content creation experience in very intelligent and context aware ways for the end users. So if your users, have a need to write quicker, write better, write faster, it's going to be an assistant to them to do that. And that's how I kind of see the future of WYSIWYG tomorrow. With that said, I of course want to show you all a live demo. So here, and I'm gonna ask Brian to actually post the CK editor uh, in link in the chat, but you can even go to the CK editor site. So here's a quick example. So I'm on the main site. This is accessible to everyone. And what you can do is you can go on the main site, click on real-time collaboration, and it gives you this little link over here. You can copy the link, go to a new tab, and then paste over. And then you're over here with this new link. So this person over here maybe disagrees that NDA is not something they want. You will immediately see that that change has been made by person B. And then maybe they disagree with that change, right? So you can track changes, discard changes, accept changes, so on and so forth. But I think what's a little bit more interesting is, let's say I wanted a little bit more explanation, or let's say I'm going to select this. Of course, it's a live demo. It's going to glitch out on me for a second. Oh, let's try this tab instead. Okay. Let's try this quickly. And let's say we want to select this entire piece of text. And let's say we would like to improve the writing, right? This is the AI assistant that's currently connected to the ChatGPT wrapper. And it has some pre-built prompts within this document so you can translate it, things like that. Or maybe we just want to change the style from legal to business. So maybe let's select that. Change the style from legal to business. And then it does something for us, does some magic behind the scenes. You can insert it below, try again. Has a very familiar UI, but maybe we want to say rewrite this in a legal tone. So you can even write like these custom prompts. And then you kind of get a new chance. And then let's say you forgot what you wrote previously. And then you have some revision history over here and things like that. So it's a very simple AI assistant. And you might say, okay, that looks great, Mrina, but why is this powerful? It's because this really just integrates into your user's workflow. Today, users, who are writing this legal document, they're already working through all of these steps and, they're collaborating on it. There's two people, making edits, giving feedback. And then in the end, if they want to enhance their writing, they have writer's block or they need to change the tone slightly and they just don't have time. They can do that, without having to go copy paste it into ChatGPT or something. They can maybe even do that in their own private instance. So it's really powerful in that sense, and really just plugs right into their user flow, which is what is really big and key today about this rich text editor. So two powerful things. You can see this is in a website, right? I'm using this in a website in real time, and I'm able to use the AI assistant while collaborating with 2 or 3 other people who are using the shareable link. So I think it's a really powerful tool, and it goes just beyond the realms of what you see is what you get. Of course, let's go into TinyMCE. If you go on their main website, I'll ask Brian to post the link for this as well. You can actually see this. And again, it's the same thing. You can choose to summarize a piece of content, and you'll get some key points. And it does seem like a very basic UI wrapper on top that connects to ChatGPT, but very powerful when in the context of your users and workflow, especially if they're a content creator and writer today. So I will flip this back here. So all in all, If there's anything you took away from this presentation and webinar today, it is that WYSIWYG is very powerful. It is a very key part of most of your users' journeys, and highly personalizing them, simplifying content creation, and enhancing it to work more intelligently and context aware, and to almost anticipate the needs of your users is where it's going to be headed next. So I am Mrina Sugosh, and that was my little spiel on WYSIWYG and why it's important. Um, Feel free to follow me for more technical details and articles and snippets on Twitter, LinkedIn, and feel free to follow us for TinyMC and CK Editor content as well. And if you guys have any questions, yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting with Brian about that.
Thanks, Myrna. That was awesome because I have not really looked deeply at any of the editors in a long time, I'll be honest. I used to back in the day, I mean, I've been at this a long time. I and back many, many years ago, there wasn't like a lot of great CMS options other than like big, expensive enterprisey options.
Mm-hmm.
So like I used to custom build like little content managers for like websites and stuff like that for clients.
That's very
And that
cool.
was the last time I remember really digging into these editors, and it's like so much has changed, which is not surprising. I mean, it should have, right? If it had remained the same, we'd be in bad shape. But yeah, like I hadn't even thought about the fact that you might add an AI assistant in there. So
Yeah.
that's really cool.
I mean, I think adding an AI assistant is just sort of the first step, right? There can be
Yeah.
even image generation tomorrow. So,
That's right. Yes. So, with regard to the AI assistant, I'm assuming this is something where you have to hook it up with your own like account on one of the providers and things like that so that any of those charges hit your account kind of thing. Is that how it is? It's like it's
yes.
got a setup where I tell it like all the details of how to connect to my
Yes.
whatever AI service I want to use.
Yeah, so essentially, like rich text editors, even like the data you type into it, we don't like store any data, right? It's a component. So at the end of the day, even with like your AI API key or anything, what it's doing is it's a simple UI wrapper, and we've taken care of all like the UI functionalities, like streaming your data. Like if you connect to the completions API, and you select stream, like how do you want that input to be streamed so seamlessly back, right? It has
Mhm.
to render in a specific way, so we've taken care of all of the sort of UI considerations from that, but in the end of the day, you are connecting to your own ChatGPT instance or Azure AI instance or AWS Bedrock instance, right? If you're using Anthropic or one of those models, and you are developing this application ideally for your users who, based on their needs. So we don't dictate which model you connect to.
Nice. So, in one of the examples that you gave, you mentioned something about React framework integration. Like, is so what exactly is entailed in the React framework integrations? Like, I can embed like React components or something like that within the editing process, or how does that work?
Well, essentially, you're getting a React component, right? When you're downloading the React integration, and you can embed that component. It's composable, so you can embed it within your own application. So if you have
Hmm.
a larger
Okay.
website, you basically take that React integration and put it into your existing app, and then you can pass in the
Okay.
parameters and stuff.
I get it. Okay. My mind was going in the wrong direction. I was thinking more like I wasn't thinking like embedding the editor in a React application. I was thinking, oh, can you do? I don't know, like MDX, where you can have, if you have some kind of pre-built components, you can drop into like the UI. I don't know if you've ever used MDX, like where it's anyway. Like I was thinking more like UI components you could drop in to the editing flow.
You
So,
can. So there is, as I said, it's very highly customizable. So if you create like a plugin to be able to drop in something pre-built, or we've had users, they've had like a pre-built template. So a lot of our users, like
mm,
Mailchimp, for example, they use the TinyMC editor for you creating these pre-built templates, advanced templates. So you have like hi specific user dot name, and then you create a template for sending like a thank you email. And those sort of templates is something you can definitely like embed into that component, like pre-built.
okay. Okay, that makes sense. So you can make it so like they can't kind of color outside the lines too
Yes.
much. Good. Yeah, that was back when I remember doing this, it was one of the problems is like, you'd hand it over to somebody who'd like you like, you had designed the site and they're like throwing all different color text on there and you're like, "What? Wait. No, I don't want you to be able to do that."
Yeah,
So,
no, you can make it as, I think, less custom. It really depends on what you want out of it at the end of the day. And as I mentioned, with like what's very fascinating about something like CK Editor, for example, is even typing is customizable, right? You can literally say, extend the typing plugin, the pre-built typing plugin that they provide, and you can customize it to render maybe longer or shorter the cursor, or you
hmm,
want it to like render at like a specific interval. So it's very interesting to sort of play around with this and just understand how they work with a website in real time, and how customizable it really is today.
right. Yeah, that makes sense because I mean, some of the examples you showed, like they look completely different. So it's not even it's not again going back to my old many years ago experience. It was always you could customize which buttons showed up, but you couldn't really change the look and feel of it, so it didn't ever like feel like it was in your application. But these like the mail editor you showed really blended nicely with
Yeah,
the application. Didn't look like it's not like I look at that and go, oh hey, that's CK editor or that's TinyMC.
exactly. And you can
Yeah.
do that, right? We have a lot of customers who do that, who just want an ed text box out of the box, out of the box. But we also have a lot of people who are like, no, we want this to have a certain look and feel, and as they should. And we need to meet, our users, are our customers at the end of the day, and we need to meet like some of these content creators and designers where they're at, which is smarter, intuitive designs and technologies. And we can't sit there and be like, we're giving you a text box. We also
Yeah.
need to kind of go with the time.
Right. Makes sense. Well, this was great. I really appreciate you coming out and talking to us about this. I think it's like, it's not a topic I see come up that much, which is why when you suggested it, I was like, oh, okay. I haven't really explored these editors in forever. So like it's good to know, like honestly, there's plenty of opportunities to like embed these kinds of things in your tooling and make things a little bit easier. And there's some of them that like you mentioned Dev, and I'm like, I'm curious, real quickly. Is there a way you can get it to support like Markdown output, or is it by default
um
always HTML?
Yeah, so I believe CK Editor actually has Markdown support,
Hmm.
and TinyMCE, well, you should keep following us to learn about if we'll have Markdown support soon.
Okay, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming out to speak, and that was really great. I definitely learned a lot about it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian, and I really enjoyed my time here as well.
Well, thanks to everybody who came. I really appreciate you coming. Please join us next week. Ray will be here. We've also got the week after. We've got 3 events on that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So we've got a lot of stuff coming up the rest of the month. So please join us for those. Until then, we'll see you. Bye.